Recently, a new Labour government got elected in the UK, and one of their main pledges was to build 1.5 million new homes. But as our new Deputy Prime Minister made a big announcement about how exactly they're going to live up to this pledge, controversies spiralled out across the media. For after all, building 1.5 million new homes across our tiny, overpopulated island is going to destroy our beautiful, bountiful, perfect countryside. We just can't have both nature and enough comfortable, spacious homes for everyone, right? Well, of course we can, in a Solarpunk world, and I'll explain how at the end of this video. But firstly, well, in this world, the push and pull between housing and nature leaves a trail of angry people in its wake. So let's grab a cup of tea and sit indoors as we explore the wonderful world of NIMBYism, nature, and the housing crisis. So why did Labour make this pledge? Well, like many places across the world, the UK is suffering from a housing crisis, a pretty big one. According to the charity Shelter, in December 2023, there were at least 309,000 people living homeless across the UK. Add to that the 1.29 million households on council house waiting lists between 2022 and 2023, and the estimated 2 million people forced to rent housing with some seriously dangerous conditions, such as mould, broken boilers, pests, and electrical hazards. And you can see that we've got some serious issues over here. So I'm just going to give you a little story time of my personal experiences. So I moved away from my family home at 18 down here to Cornwall to start studying at university. I've been here around 5 years now, and I've had to go through my fair share of nightmares just trying to find somewhere to live. Firstly, as a student, most housing conditions were just abysmal and exploitative. Like, landlords could get away with doing the bare minimum and charging a ridiculous sum for it just because of the demand. All the student houses would come online in January for the next September, and you had to literally be on the phone on the day they dropped for a chance at being able to get a viewing and secure a house. I remember people in my year group living in camper vans because they literally couldn't find anywhere to live. And honestly, coming out of uni, it's pretty much the same. High rents, mouldy houses. I mean, it probably doesn't help that I live in a coastal town where it rained literally every day from November to March last year. And I haven't even begun to mention the absurd amount of houses that get turned into Airbnbs for the summer, just because Cornwall is a particularly touristy destination. I even had a friend who got kicked out of the flat they were renting long term for a week just so the landlady could rent it out as an Airbnb. My friend was literally given a few days notice to pack up all of their stuff and find somewhere to go for a week. Anyway, I'm still very lucky in the sense that I chose to move down here, and apart from one particularly mouldy house, I've been lucky to find alright, if slightly expensive, house shares with friends and my partner. But for locals who have been born and raised in Cornwall, the situation is even worse. And I haven't even touched on actually buying a house, which at this point is basically impossible for most young people. So the reasons behind why my experience and the experience of many people is so dire is due to several factors. 1. Housing is seen as an investment, not a right. Landlords can buy as many houses as they want, charge as much as they want for them, and not really be faced with any real repercussions if their houses are full of mould, pests, or other dangers. And since landlords buy houses to rent out for a profit, obviously most of them are going to turn them into Airbnbs or other short-term accommodations because this generates them more money. At the moment, there is no limit on the amount of time a property can be let out short-term outside of London. Don't we love unbridled market capitalism? 2. Social housing is being eaten away by the state. Social housing has shrunk by 1.6 million from 1979 to 2022, yet people's demands for them have actually increased. The UK's right to buy scheme is partly to blame for this, where those who live in council houses can buy them back from the council and thus change them from social to private housing. 3. New house building schemes are built to make the most profit, not to meet the demands of the people. Expensive detached houses are being built in sprawling commuter estates with no access to real amenities. No shops, libraries, schools or parks. In the process, the last remaining chunks of nature we have in the UK are being colonised by these developments, which is leading to a whole host of other issues I'm going to explore in the next section. The result? Everyone is dissatisfied. People are really struggling to find safe, comfortable, affordable homes. Those who are lucky enough to already own a home in a greenbelt location are really scared about this pledge that 1.5 million homes are about to be built near them, destroying the very limited pockets of nature they have access to. But how the fuck do we get out of this mess? And how do we make sure that nature, something that is already so limited in the UK, isn't further lost in the process of trying to house millions more people? Well, according to some, the answer is to not build houses in their backyard. Oh, and to stop immigration, of course. When I interned with a conservation organisation in Italy a few years ago, there was something that kept coming up that got stuck in my head. All of the conservationists there worked so hard to protect and rewild the natural environment, working directly with local farmers to ensure that people could coexist with the local wildlife, which included wolves and bears, and yet they really had a bone to pick with the few wind turbines dotted across some of the mountains. When I asked them why, they put it down to 2 reasons. 1. Wind turbines kill birds, which, okay, I guess that's true, but surely more birds are going to be killed every year from climate change, which is caused by fossil fuels, than from trying to move away from fossil fuels by building wind turbines. And 2. The wind turbines spoilt and ruined the view of the beautiful, natural, wild landscape. And when I asked them where else they thought the wind turbines should go, they couldn't give a concrete answer. Just not here, they said. Not in our backyard. Ah, NIMBYism. The not in my backyard attitude. It's something especially present in the UK. And whilst when I was in Italy it was a simple case of conservationists not wanting to spoil the natural landscape, in the UK NIMBYism is interlinked with a whole host of other issues. When it comes to wind turbines or housing or any other development in the UK, a lot of people get riled up. They don't want it in their backyard. After all, nature and green spaces are already so limited. People already feel like they are being squeezed, that they are running out of space and greenery, that they don't have good enough transport links or job opportunities or amenities. So bringing in more housing, more people, in the NIMBY's mind, that's just going to squeeze out more of their already poorly functioning local services and amenities, convert more nature and peaceful green space into concrete and brick. And they're kind of not wrong, because the way that most housing is being developed in the UK means more low-density housing sprawling out into the green belt, without much thought for amenities, services or green space. Why? Well, profit is prioritised by development companies, of course. It's much more profitable to build lots of 5-bedroom detached houses with perfectly manicured gardens, and not have to think about incorporating schools and parks and libraries and allotments and bike lanes. Even with the new 1.5 million housing pledge from Labour I mentioned earlier, only 50% are going to be affordable homes. Though this time Labour are saying they're going to be building warm and sustainable homes with local roads and GP surgeries. But yeah, we'll see. Unfortunately, when people feel powerless about what's going on in their local surroundings, like with the development of new houses close to their own, they are more likely to become angry and then become manipulated by the media-owning capitalist billionaires to fall into far-right rhetoric. And this is kind of what has happened recently with the rise of far-right terrorism across the UK, where white supremacists are rioting in our streets, pulling Muslims and other BIPOC out of cars, beating people up and setting fire to their shops. Have you ever seen this image? It's a very accurate description of what is happening today throughout Britain's streets, as well as the train of thought that a lot of NIMBYs fall into. More houses being built near them, more pressure on their local amenities and services, less nature. Well, that's the fault of immigrants, of course, who are coming in hordes and raising the population, meaning all these extra houses have to be built and creating worse conditions for British working class people. Yeah, except that irregular immigration only makes up Oh, and the people who want all the cookies? Well, it's not immigrants, but the 1% of the 1%. The people who own the media, who own the development companies, who gift large donations in sums of money to the government to manipulate them. And these people benefit the most from causing divide and dissent, from creating hatred amongst those who don't have much at all against those who have even less. And that way they can keep churning up a ridiculous profit, from selling ads on the Daily Mail to keeping developing luxury houses to even bribing the government to keep churning out oil fields. Meanwhile, all the little ants down below are being violent amongst themselves and forgetting to look up at the economic and political manipulation that's going on right above their heads, just to keep capitalism churning and help the rich get richer. Brilliant, right? Now, whilst most NIMBYs have fallen into this trap, goaded by the media to blame the ruining of their local area on immigrants, people of colour, and whatever other targeted bullshit the media is pushing next, there are still others whose NIMBYism might be slightly more innocent. Perhaps their concern really is only for the nature around them, for the birds and the bats and the bees that are going to be destroyed by new housing developments. Not at all for the resale value of their property. I jest, kind of. After all, property and housing at the moment is still seen as an investment rather than a right. Even so, the destruction of nature from new housing development is a real concern, whether it's being expressed by more innocent NIMBYs or just racist bigots. After all, most of us do want to live in a greener world, where nature and humans can coexist in harmony. But the problem is with our housing crisis being so dire. If no more homes are built just in order to keep preserving nature, then we're going to have more and more homeless people on our streets. More and more young people never being able to call a home their own. And more people paying extortionate rents for dangerous flats just because their landlords can keep pushing up prices higher and higher because of increasing demand. So the question is, nature and homelessness, or no nature and housing for everyone? Because according to the NIMBYs, we just can't have both. After all, we're only a small island, right? Of course the NIMBYs are wrong. There's a lot of opportunity to prioritise both nature and people when thinking about housing. In a world without a profit motive, where our needs and desires are met alongside nature's, where decisions are made through horizontally organised structures, we'd be able to retrofit, revamp and recreate houses to better suit the needs of individuals, communities and nature. Here's how. 1. Architecture. How do we make housing more sustainable, more comfortable, more nature-centric, more solarpunk? Well, it goes beyond plastering plants on skyscrapers and hoping for the best. A. Retrofitting. Most houses in the UK are incredibly poorly retrofitted, leading to cold homes in the winter and warm homes in the summer. And of course, a massive waste of energy. Existing homes need better insulation for people to save on energy and have warmer homes. This will in turn also lead to less hazards like mold. B. Energy incorporation. Existing houses could be installed with solar panels or heat pumps, but connecting these up in a microgrid, a small network with a local source of supply that can be attached to a centralised national grid but still function independently, would help make housing communities more self-reliant and energy resilient. C. Less urban sprawl. How do we stop the endless sprawl to make more room for nature? Well, it starts with higher density housing, but importantly, where this high density housing meets people's needs and desires. We don't need cyberpunk high-rises just to combat sprawl, but well-insulated, light and airy spaces designed to meet the needs of both abled and disabled people. Of course, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be able to live in more separate housing integrated with nature if they wish, but rather that houses in built-up environments could be made taller rather than wider, to leave more room for both nature and community spaces. D. Nature incorporation. I feel like the stereotypical solarpunk picture is always some AI-generated glass tower with trees or vines plastered all over it. But incorporating nature into buildings doesn't mean just sticking plants onto the sides of them. Homes could integrate Swift or bee bricks into their walls to invite wildlife back into our living spaces. Incorporate natural gardens by sowing wildflower meadows or digging and creating natural ponds. Or even ensuring that everyone has their own balcony that they can grow food on if they wish, to re-attract pollinators. Also, habitat creation, especially with trees, should be a key part of any area around newly built housing. Spaces between housing should be as green as possible. After all, trees have been shown to reduce urban heat by up to 12 degrees Celsius, making outdoor spaces more comfortable for people and wildlife. 2. Community design. A. Housing needs to be closer to amenities. Healthcare, schools, tool libraries and repair workshops, places to buy food and needed resources, community gardens and allotments, all should be at a walking distance to most housing as a necessity. The concept of the 15-minute city comes in here. People should be able to have access to all of the amenities they need within a 15-minute walk, bike or train. B. Third spaces. This is kind of similar to my first point, but I feel like solarpunk architecture and planning would need to incorporate more third spaces as well as just basic amenities into housing developments. But what are third places? Well, the term is usually used to refer to somewhere that is separate from someone's home or place of work, and is somewhere that people can go for socialization, relaxation and entertainment. This might include parks abundant with nature trails, wildlife, plant life and natural swimming spots, but could also include free outdoor or indoor cinemas, theatres, museums and galleries. It could also include free educational spaces that the community can take part in, such as knowledge libraries or spaces for community book clubs or learning clubs. It could include spaces for people to make art or gain new skills, such as free community-owned makerspaces filled with workbenches, easels and pottery, virtual reality, gaming studios and music studios, and even dedicated spaces spaces for street arts. And lastly, it could include community-owned sports parks and spaces, such as community-owned swimming pools, climbing gyms, yoga centres, or skate parks. C. Transport should be people-friendly. Bikes and public transport should come first and cars second, or ditched altogether, especially in more built-up environments. Then there's trams, electric buses, underground and overground railways, sail and electric boats and ports in coastal or river-based locations. And maybe in the future, even electric planes or blimps could be part of our public transport network. 3. Systemic change. All of this solarpunk housing and community design won't be any good if it's still landlords owning everything and making a profit out of doing so. Here's some ideas for other structural modes that could be used in a solarpunk, communalist or anarchist society. A. Co-housing. This is where buildings are designed around a shared space to form an intentional community. For example, a group living together could have their own bedrooms whilst sharing a kitchen or garden. Residents might also share responsibilities such as cleaning or cooking. This already exists in the UK with house shares, which are very common amongst students and younger people, but at the moment most people house share out of financial necessity rather than intentionally. This option might reduce the space needed for housing, increase community bonds, and reduce the labour everyone has to do, but it might not be the right fit for everyone, and that's okay. Some of us are more introverted than others. B. Housing cooperatives. A cooperative is an organisational type where its members jointly own and run the organisation. For housing, this means that every resident is a member and has an equal say in how the housing block is managed and maintained. This puts residents back in control of their housing, and means they can collectively self-manage the costs of upgrading or maintaining their housing. According to Cooperatives UK, there are currently 800 housing cooperatives across the UK, and these are only growing. In fact, in countries such as Switzerland, housing cooperatives are super popular. Housing cooperatives there are called Wohnbaugenossenschaften, excuse my terrible German, and are responsible for 5% of Switzerland's total housing stock, and this goes up to 25% in Zurich. Housing cooperatives in the UK right now could offer cheaper rents than the current market, and the collected rent wouldn't go to a private profiteering landlord, but to a collective pot that each member of the cooperative is part of, to do repairs and maintenance, or to expand the cooperative to buy new properties, to get new members on board, and thus to further reduce the fee. However, I have seen some venture capitalist type housing cooperatives that are starting to spring up here in the UK. Thanks LinkedIn feed. And whilst at first glance they seem like a big leap forwards, most of the housing they provide is still just being leased from a landlord. So each cooperative member's money is being pooled collectively and then just going back to pay a private landlord, rather than towards autonomously owning the housing themselves. C. Community land trusts. These are democratic not-for-profits that steward local land and assets for a community. Local members can join as members and help to run the trust, which can then develop what the community most needs on the land that it stewards, whether that's housing, amenities, or third places, in a way that's affordable for local people. So, is all of this actually doable? I feel like this is the question that most of us get asked whenever we talk about utopic ideas, because looking at the current state of the world, it doesn't seem like it ever would be. Not in a million years. And sure, if we trust current systems to get us there, there certainly isn't any chance. Because prioritizing the needs of both people and nature at the expense of profit and hierarchical structures will always go against what the current owning class and state want. So yes, I think it is possible for us to have all of this if we want to, but we need to get there collectively and horizontally by aggregating the skills and resources we have to create the future we want to see in our communities when it comes to housing, nature, or anything else. And I really do believe that we can do so. If you feel inspired by this video but don't know how to go about next steps, after all that is often the hardest part, I'd recommend researching which grassroots groups you already have in your community that are working on community housing, community energy, community nature, or anything else, and get involved. I recently discovered a co-housing project being built in my town which I had absolutely no idea existed until I joined my local mutual credit network. More about that in the next video. So yeah, join local grassroots groups and solidarity networks, and I promise there will be people out there already working on prefiguring our communities, and they need your help. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been watching my videos recently. There's a lot more of you than there were a couple months back, and that's mostly thanks to the collaboration I did with NIMBYism. So also another big thank you to him for working with me earlier this year. I hope you're all enjoying my content still, and if you've got any ideas for future videos, then please just let me know in the comments down below. Thank you, and see you in the next one. Bye!